Hello and welcome to BookTube with Simon. Why is there a pancake? Take it nice. Good morning, America. How are you today? Any plans? Anything in the diary? It is, of course, Election Day 2020, and so it seems like the perfect opportunity for me to discuss what happened by Hillary Clinton. I've had this book for a couple of years, and normally I keep my political books for the new year. It's normally the second book I read in the year. Yes, I do plan that way. But this one in particular, I felt it just had to be read during election season. I actually do this with a fair amount of trepidation. I read a lot of politics, but I'm very aware politics is a divisive topic at the best of times. Both of the candidates for the 2016 election were particularly divisive, and looking at the reviews of what happened on Goodread, they're just extremely partisan. There are people very, very vocally for and against Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Very little of the review content there is about the actual book. So I am aware of the risks that I'm taking here. You're planning to do a political episode on election day? Yeah. Really? Yeah. You're going to screw this up and people are going to unsubscribe. Well, I was also thinking it might be fun to do a sequel to the musical episode. Politics is great. Stick with the politics. Yeah, good luck. Yeah. Sandra, we're going to need a new host to take over BookTube. Yeah. Try and get someone called Simon if you can, so we don't have to make the t-shirts up again. So before I get into the actual review, perhaps you will allow me a few moments just to set the scene and discuss memoirs and my approach to political books in general. My fellow non-Americans and Americans, I believe in a political memoir which can, like the BBC, inform, educate and entertain, and unlike the BBC, is not impartial and doesn't spend the 1970s leaving children in the care of creepy old men. Yes, these political memoirs are intended to help us get to know the candidate, get to know their policies, get to know what went on behind closed doors, tell us about the massive events in our lifetime through the eyes of the people who have to deal with it, make it happen or respond to it, and give us the scandal that we're not going to get from anywhere else. So, like I say, I've read quite a lot of political stuff. And if I was to rank them from best to worst in terms of being a memoir or a book, that would not be the same order as if I ranked the authors by likability or by how likely I am to vote for them, actually. You can get brilliant politicians and fantastic people that I really like who are terrible at writing a diary, and you can get shockingly bad politicians who can write a very good book. So when it comes to reviewing political memoirs, like I'm about to do, I think the best reviews are those which are focused on the book, and you really shouldn't be able to discern anything about the reviewer's politics. So I am going to be speaking about Hillary Clinton's book, What Happened, but this is not a review of Hillary Clinton, the person, or of the politician, or of the presidential candidate. This is about my impression of this book as a memoir and its contribution to political literature. And I'm hoping there is a cross-section of society who like to sit and watch YouTube videos of an evening and also like discussing the contributions of books to political literature. That cross-section is probably called single. This is my review of What Happened by Hillary Rodham Clinton.
From NBC News, Decision Night in America.
You're watching Hillary Clinton, The Results. Follow live as one voter goes to the polls today and elects the future of what happens when it goes down in BookTube with Simon history. It's going to be a bumpy ride. The reviews on Goodreads have been singularly useless, partisan and not very helpful, which means our exit poll is non-existent. It's all to play for. Stay tuned. So bearing in mind the comments that I've shared, I'm going to frame this review very specifically in terms of how well this book fulfilled the 7 things I was looking for when I picked it up. And the first thing, I guess, is what happened. The 2016 presidential election, I think we can all agree, was like no other that we've ever seen in our lifetime. So the first thing I really wanted to know is what happened. And I think perhaps this election more than many others, there seemed to be a new headline or a new series of headlines every day. It was just constant news, and any one of those stories in any other election could have dominated the election because there were so many of them. A lot of them just disappeared into the general chaos of that time. So the first thing I was looking for is, okay, the book's called What Happened. How much does it tell us about what happened? Welcome back, and the results are starting to come in for that all-important overall rating from Memoirizonia. But the first swing state has declared its new What Happensville, and we've... Anyway, so we've got a result about what happened, and it's coming in at 40% to Clinton. That is 40% to Clinton. Stay with us. Yeah, sadly not as much as I wanted it to. I guess what I would have expected, and what I think would have been good, is something that was fairly chronological. In fact, a large proportion of this book talks about Hillary Clinton's general outlook on life. There's kind of a large chunk about how she took the decision to run for president and how kicked off, and then there's a fair bit on post-match analysis, which I'll get to, but the actual campaign there's not so much of. There are a few centerpieces certainly that are mentioned in some detail, but the structure of the book has the run-up to deciding to run, and then it has a day in the life of the campaign in a single chapter, and then sort of post-match analysis and her general political and policy sort of stuff. So in terms of telling us what happened, I don't think it does it. Certainly not in the way that I hoped for, not in the detail I expected. I think it would have been much better to have seen something much more chronological, charting the whole path through the primaries, through the main campaign, across the presidential debates, and really following it. Because although she talked about different topics and subjects in different parts of the book, I think the chronology would have been really, really useful to see how different events came together to produce the outcome that it did. So in terms of what happened, I don't feel like it did what I wanted it to. Sorry, I'm just going to have to interrupt you there. We do have a second result coming in. Yep, we've got the swing state declaration from post-match analysis. That's post-match analysis coming in at 87% to Clinton. That is a stonking victory. 87%, a decided swing for Clinton on post-match analysis. But what's the final result going to be? It's still just too early to tell. So I mentioned the post-match analysis bit. This is much stronger. There are a number of chapters dedicated to talking about why it happened. Generally, I don't read as many political memoirs from opposition leaders or losing candidates because they are typically less interesting, I think. They are a step removed from the major events that are unfolding. So this is only the second one that I've read that's really written by the loser, if you like. I think it's a very difficult thing to do because inevitably it's a combination of factors. There will be things that the candidate wishes they had done differently, things that the campaign perhaps could have done differently. There will be strengths of the opposing campaign that you have to mitigate, and there will be external factors. And that would be true in any sort of campaign or any sort of political election or referendum. In the 2016 election in particular, we know that there have been a lot of comments about collusion and interference and everything from Russia to Jim Comey and the FBI and lots of different things that may or may not have contributed. So it can be really difficult, I think, for the loser to write an account which is gracious enough to admit their own failings, but also to be able to talk about things external to them that they couldn't control, whether that is by accident or design or just really bad luck. And I think she does it really well. Some of the reviews on Goodreads will tell you that she just takes no responsibility, she blames everybody else for everything. I didn't find that to be the case. I found that there were numerous times where she expresses regret, things that she wishes she hadn't said or had done or hadn't done. But she also gives what I find to be very sincere accounts of other things that affected the election as well. And again, this isn't about fact checking, it's not about me saying that I agree or disagree with her post-match analysis, but as a reader I found it really interesting because she had put a lot of thought into the different things that affected the campaign and the outcome. There are even infographics and charts, which definitely gets a gold star from me. So as a writer, I think she's put a lot of effort into figuring out in her own head what she thinks, and she communicates that very well in a very robust way. We are going to have to come back to you because another state has just declared. We've just got the result from New Moscow. Yes, New Moscow have come in with the result of the Russia stuff. That's the Russia stuff coming in from New Moscow, and that is a swing of 72% to Clinton. That is 72% to Clinton. Is this going to be enough for her to win a solid rating for the book? We don't know. All eyes remain on Memoirizonia for the final result. Obviously, very closely related to the post-match analysis is the Russia saga in particular, and this may be one of the most sensitive aspects to discuss on this channel, which doesn't normally talk about things that are quite so serious. But the Russia thing, from me, obviously, being in the UK and a step removed from all of it, I haven't necessarily seen all of the news reports and findings from the different agencies, and there have certainly been in my consumption of the news, there have been some inconsistencies or things that I haven't really understood about the various accounts regarding Russia. And again, I find that this book, What Happened, Hillary Clinton goes into a lot of detail about the Russian interference in particular. She gives a lot of evidence to back up her account. Once again, this isn't about me saying that Russia did or didn't interfere. I'm neither endorsing nor dismissing her views on the FBI and the different agencies who were involved in those investigations. But from reading the book, it educated me a lot. I have a much clearer understanding of the Democrats' account of the Russia situation and of Hillary Clinton's account of the Russia situation. I feel much more informed based having read this book about this pretty massive allegation about a foreign power trying to disrupt democracy itself in America, which is a colossal allegation. In terms of the authorship of the book, I think she gets the balance right because she makes very, very forthright and impassioned arguments about the consequences not just to her campaign, but the consequences as she sees it to the United States in general. She makes comments about what should have been done differently, what should be done in future, and about the broader situation moving forward, and what future elections, including potentially this one, look like with the misinformation and the fake news that can be generated by foreign powers. This is exactly what I find so fascinating about political memoirs. It is reading about the massive events of the day in the words through the eyes of the people involved in it. Now, if Donald Trump publishes his account of the election and his time in the White House, whether that ends today or in 4 years, again, I will judge the book on its merits as a memoir and what I managed to get out of it as a reader. It's not, for me, the purpose of this review isn't about how much I believe or disbelieve of either candidate's account of the events themselves, just how sincere their account appears and how much they believe it and how much I can understand their perspective having read it. Okay, if you could just stop mansplaining that, please, because we are going to now get the result on women in politics. That is, women in politics from Womenskonsken. Anyway, the result has come in. Women in politics has come in for Hillary Clinton's account of women in politics. That has come in at 92% to Hillary Clinton. That is a 92% result for Hillary Clinton on the matter of women in politics. Mansplain that. Hillary Clinton was, of course, notable for being the first female nominee from a major political party in the US to be the president. And near the beginning of the book, Hillary Clinton talks at great length about her perspective of what it is like to be a woman in politics. And I found it very interesting, actually. Hillary Clinton talks very proudly about being the first person to do numerous things before becoming the first nominee. And I found it a really interesting chapter to read as a guy, because obviously I'm not going to experience the misogyny that she has identified, or the sexism that she has identified as being thrown at her. And she gives some really good examples of how women just can't win. Although Theresa May was our second Prime Minister in the UK, she was obviously the first since the Me Too movement, and so that led to discussion about how the media was maybe treating her differently from her male predecessors. One of the most obvious examples, of course, being around her appearance, what she wears, the fact that Theresa May had never had children, was an issue that is unlikely to have been levelled at a guy in the same way. But Hillary Clinton goes on to give lots of further examples of anomalies where she finds that women are held to a double standard and perhaps a no-win situation. Hillary Clinton talks about her frustrations in that women are seemingly not able to be angry, nor are they allowed to be too reserved. They're not allowed to be emotional, nor are they allowed to be too closed off and unknowable. I certainly don't think it's political or partisan to say that women in politics of whatever party have so many more microaggressions levelled against them by the media in particular, by the public possibly as well, by colleagues for sure. The account is always uncomfortable when you read it, and I think she's very articulate and balanced in her exposition of these anomalies and injustices, frankly. I found it to be a really informative chapter. Did you enjoy it? You seem to be particularly interested in this review. we are still waiting on that all-important result from Memoirizonia, which could well tip the balance. But we do have more news coming in now. We've got a result coming in from Policycheusets. That's from Policycheusets with a result on Hillary Clinton's policy making. We're expecting it any minute now. I think there's just some last minute checking of the votes. The presiding officer, I think, or the returning officer is just having a look. Do you have either of those, returning officers or presiding officers in the US? Perhaps I should have researched that before I started twittering away, but in any case, the result's in, so we can just move seamlessly on from that bit. And the result from Policycheusets is 35% to Clinton. That'll be a disappointing result for her. I know that she really wanted this state. Policycheusets, just 35% disappointing result for Hillary Clinton. Can she pull it back though? Well, that might just depend on the result from Memoirizonia. So policy, there's a fair amount of policy in it. I guess it's difficult in this scenario to talk too much about policy decisions and what motivates your thinking, because she didn't get to office. So a lot of this is what I would like to do, and it would just have been restating the election pitch rather than tracking its evolution in office. There is a fair amount in there. She talks about some big issues at some length. There are lengthy passages on gun violence. There's a whole chapter around the mothers of black children who have been killed and what changes they wanted to see. She discussed Flint and the lead poisoning at some length. But I do find that it was quite piecemeal. I think there are a lot of gaps in my understanding of her political outlook. Hillary Clinton says numerous times that most of the time the press were talking about her, they were talking about her email hack, which she does talk about in a whole chapter all on its own about the emails. But she's quite frustrated and mentions numerous times that her emails were mentioned 3 times more by the press than all of her policies combined, which she says means that the press were effectively telling the American public that her emails were 3 times more important than all of her policies combined. So she does sort of take this opportunity to talk about her policies a bit. But what I really think she missed out on doing was addressing the big policies that we will all remember from the 2016 election. Things like the Muslim ban, the wall across the border with Mexico, the Affordable Health Care Act. She touches on these things really briefly, but more often just says Trump didn't have any policies. Trump has no policies. And he did. He had very provocative, very controversial policies. And I think that what she needed to do is to address those directly and say why she felt that they were clearly hitting a note with enough voters for him to get into the White House, why she felt that they were the wrong policies, and what she would have done to address the hopes, fears and wishes of the voters who were encouraged by the remarks that Donald Trump was making. So I guess what she's saying is, these are the policies I wish had been reported on more, which is fine, and I'm glad she did that. There are a lot of things in there I'd never heard before or read before, but there are big policy issues that came out of that election that I don't think she gave enough time to properly dissect and analyse. Well, this election night has certainly been eventful, and we are nearing the end of the road. It is becoming mathematically impossible for this to go the opposite way from the way that it's going, but that is a deliberately ambiguous statement because I don't want to give away the final rating yet. But taking us one step closer to that final result from Memoirizonia and the overall rating is the Candor and Personality result. That is, Candor and Personality have just declared a whopping 83% victory for Senator Hillary Clinton. I know that she will be delighted with that. That is 83% for Hillary Clinton in the Candor state. Candor and personality are important to me when I read these books, but the criteria, I guess, is vague. I just want to feel like the person is being genuine. So David Cameron's memoir is actually, it's quite funny in parts. He's quite catty, he's quite bitchy, more so than I anticipated at all, and it reads very much like he is just putting it out there. Gordon Brown's is much more reserved and careful, but it feels very much like a Gordon Brown memoir. So in both cases, although they are written in very different styles, I felt like you got an authentic version of their memoir. In What Happened, I find that Hillary Clinton comes across very well. She's got a very warm writing style. It feels quite intimate. There are, you know, kind of asides to the reader in parenthesis, and you know, kind of the equivalent of rolling her eyes at different things and so on. But it does feel candid. It does feel like she's just sitting down, saying it like it is. There aren't any pretensions or airs and graces. It seems like quite a down-to-earth and honest account from her perspective of what happened in 2016. Well, we all know the education bill has been a really important part of this review, and so now we find out how much informing has really been done as the result comes in from Informianapolis. That is Informianapolis giving us their result. Information is at a fairly disappointing 22%. That is 22% for Clinton out of Informianapolis. That is not the result she was looking for. It will be a disappointing end to the night. That all-important swing state from Memoirizonia is going to be all-important. Obviously, I'm much more familiar with the UK political system than the American political system. I hoped, to be honest, going into this book, 30-year veteran of politics, former First Lady, wife of President Bill Clinton, of course, I really hoped to learn more about the mechanics of American politics than I did, and more about the parties and some of the quirks, and just generally become better informed. I thought that this book would have been a great opportunity to throw in some nuggets of information, and I feel like in a large way this book is written for an American audience. There's a lot of presumed knowledge there, and maybe that's fair. Maybe it should have been written for an American audience. But a lot of the memoirs I've read in the past have explained in much more detail the mechanics. And I think in particular, Hillary Clinton won the public vote. And I think in particular, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. She won 3 million more votes than Donald Trump, but lost the election and didn't win the White House. And that is a significant anomaly in, I guess, logic, and a source of both extreme frustration for her and also of some comfort in terms of the response of the American people. And I feel like there was a real missed opportunity for her to explain how that could happen and what alternatives there might be. In the UK, it's far less likely that you would win the most seats but lose the popular vote, or vice versa. The last time that happened was actually 1951, when the Labour Party won the most votes but the Conservative Party formed the government with Winston Churchill. Funnily enough, after the Second World War. So one of our most famous Prime Ministers lost the second popular vote that he faced. So I do think that somebody with Hillary Clinton's experience, and considering the impact this had on her election specifically, I would have really wanted to see a lot more discussion about that and the alternatives that she might endorse, or why she wouldn't endorse the alternatives if she was in fact in favour of retaining the current system. Again, for those not in the UK, 10 years ago we had a referendum on changing the way that we vote. The outcome was that we should keep it as it is, but a lot of the smaller parties like the Liberal Democrats and the Greens constantly bring this up. because they feel it's unfair to them, because the smaller parties are much less likely to win the most votes in a constituency, but collectively by the end of the election they generally achieve a greater proportion of the popular vote than they do the number of seats in the House of Parliament. So that is why they often will campaign for it to be changed. Hillary Clinton did talk about how difficult it is for any party to win a third term in the White House, and she talked a bit about the demographics that make up America, and particularly what the ending of the steel and coal trades have done for these populations. There was something else which came up, which was the press, or as they became known during the election, the mainstream media. Hillary Clinton's point was that Hillary Clinton articulates her frustration that when Donald Trump found himself in the middle of a scandal, in order to try and appear to be fair, the press would then exaggerate some things about her to give her a similar level of scandal. I think the example she gave is if a button popped off her jacket and Donald Trump stripped naked, the headline would say both candidates suffered wardrobe malfunction and campaigns are in disarray. And she said that this false equivalence is really damaging because it creates an impression that everything is equal and nothing is worse, and it becomes more difficult for the electorate to understand the context and the comparison between these events. I mention this because I found it interesting that she makes that point, because in the UK, in the same year as Donald Trump was elected, the UK voted to leave the European Union. Donald Trump's victory and the Brexit vote are generally accepted to be right-wing victories, but right of right rather than centre right. And I read a really interesting book by Tim Shipman about Brexit, and he makes a very, very similar point about how the BBC in particular was tying itself in knots to try and be balanced. And so if 10 experts were to intervene on behalf of the Remain campaign, and Joe from Johnson was to read his tea leaves, and the tea leaves were to say you should go, the BBC would treat those as equally prominent, so it wasn't showing favour to one campaign or the other. And Tim Shipman's point is, well, that's not actually sensible or balanced, because you are falsely elevating wee Joe from Johnson. Shipman's point was that's not really balanced. What is balanced is treat experts like experts and treat wee Joe from Johnson like wee Joe from Johnson, regardless of whose side they're on, rather than this false equivalence. And so this is something I've thought about quite a lot since reading Tim Shipman's book, and as I say, it came up again in Hillary Clinton's book, discussing a vote that happened in the same year, and it's led me to think about whether we are doing the right thing by treating experts as much more prominent, or whether we're doing the right thing by making sure that campaign coverage is completely 50-50 in terms of the emphasis and gravity that every contributor and intervention is treated. And the only way to resolve it is to investigate. Let us consider the facts. You are asking the wrong question. It is not a matter of the expert versus the rest, but what is an expert anyway? An ex-colleague is someone who was a colleague. An ex-partner is someone who was a partner. An ex-display item is an item that was displayed. Therefore, an expert is somebody who was pert and is now pert no longer. You should not be listening to people with doctorates or degrees. You should be listening to people who have grown fat and saggy. There is the answer to life's problems. There is only one conclusion. Listen to the oldest, fattest, wrinkliest person who you can find reasonable evidence of once being svelte and skinny. And the result has been called. We have a result. We have a result. Is this going to be a victory speech or a concession speech from Clinton? The result from Memoir Azonia has arrived, and we can announce that that is overall. I found it interesting, I found it entertaining, and I found it informative. So as a memoir, this stands up to scrutiny, and I enjoyed it and I would recommend it. I love a good election show, so I will be staying up tonight to watch the results. I am far too excited, but I'm a political geek. To my American friends in particular, good luck today. I hope you get the president that you want. Thank you all for watching, and keep safe whatever happens.